edition of RCE. I am your host, Brock Palen. You can find us online at rce-cast.com. I also have Jeff Squyres from Cisco Systems and one of the authors of OpenMPI. Jeff is once again helping me out, and we've been a little delayed here, Jeff.
Yeah, we've been a little slackful here in the summer doldrums, I guess, that we haven't gotten all of them out. But we've got a flurry of recordings coming up. I think we're recording 3 different podcasts within a week.
Yes.
And then measure. Yes.
Yes, because I am going to be at a conference for a week, the first week of August, about our topic today. I'm going to be at TeraGrid 2010, and we have with us 2 guests from TeraGrid. But before that, usual stuff. Jeff, you have some interesting new blog posts out. Since we haven't had a show, you have a couple out.
Yeah,
where's your
I do.
blog?
Well, I've been a little slackful on my blog as well, and so I'm trying to put out a couple in a row to keep my stats up, keep my blog entries per month up, because I get a little heat from that from the Cisco PR department. But yeah, actually, so the last post I did was I did a little play on the popular Old Spice commercials, and about half the people got it, and about half the people didn't. They're like, "Why are you on a horse? What does that have to do with high performance computer networking?" But then, the young'uns like Brock here got it and thought it was immensely funny, so I feel my mission was accomplished.
Yeah, you can find a link to Jeff's blog off of the RCE website. So today our 2 guests we have Kay Hunt and Scott Lathrop. They both work with TeraGrid in slightly different ways. I'll let them introduce and talk about what they each individually do. So, Scott, could you take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm with University of Chicago, and I'm the area director for education outreach and training for the TeraGrid project.
And I'm Kay Hunt. I'm with Purdue University, and I am with TeraGrid. Been there for about 4 years now, and my main interest and my main tasks have to do with the Campus Champion program that's under the education outreach and training arm of TeraGrid that Scott is in charge of.
In full disclosure, I should inform that I am the University of Michigan's Campus Champion, along with Andrew Caird of the University of Michigan. So this is how I know Kay, and this was a little bit of a inside deal here before the TeraGrid conference. So could one of you explain exactly what is TeraGrid for those who have never heard of it, or maybe heard of it and not really sure?
Sure, be glad to. So let me do the short version. www.teragrid.org will provide a rich array of content and information, but TeraGrid is funded primarily by the National Science Foundation and provides high-performance computing, supercomputing resources, if you will, in support of scientific research and education for people across the country. It's primarily for academic research, so researchers from any U.S. institution that want to do computational science can request time and access to resources that are scattered currently across 11 different sites. So there are 11 different organizations that are formally a part of the TeraGrid project that's funded by NSF.
Okay, so if a user wants to get started on the TeraGrid, what exactly are they looking at, like contributing to the TeraGrid versus getting from the TeraGrid? What kind of services does the TeraGrid provide?
So anyone that wants to use the facility can make a request for time. The simplest is a startup account or an education account. And that's a request they can put in. That's a fairly straightforward form they fill out. And nominally within 2 to 3 weeks, they'll have an account and they can start using the facilities. As I mentioned, the facilities span 11 different sites, but there's some 20 different computing systems. So there's a variety of architectures that they can get access to. And once they have access, the researcher or the educator that may want to use this in a classroom activity can upload their code and start running it and work on optimizing the code. And then for a researcher who really wants to go full bore, then they can request additional time The startup account is really to get them started, help them figure out which system or architecture may be most appropriate, and then they can request a much larger allocation of time.
So when you say an allocation of time, are these CPU hours on a system, or are these time with support people to help you work on a code? What exactly are the services?
So an individual can request computer time on any of these systems. That would allow them, and I should say this time is all free because it's funded by the National Science Foundation. They can request hours of time, which could be, for a startup account, for the kinds of systems we're talking about, it would be nominally 30,000 hours of computer time. There are projects today requesting millions of hours of computing time to do their research. In addition, they can request a large amount of data storage if they're doing something that's heavily data intensive. They can also request the time of some TeraGrid staff to help them optimize their code to take the best advantage of the computing resources they're being provided. So, and then they can also request access to visualization servers so they can do remote visualization of the research they're doing to produce some visualization to show others the results of the calculations they're running.
So when I first got involved with high-performance computing as a student employee, just swapping CPUs on old machines that were about on their way out, we were involved in something called NPACI, which was also a National Science Foundation computing resource provider to people around the country. Is there a relationship between TeraGrid and NPACI?
Yeah, so this program has actually evolved. It started out with the National Science Foundation funding what they call the supercomputing centers back in 1985, 1986. And there have been a number of programs that the National Science Foundation has funded since then. As you're referencing, along the way, NPACI was an effort that was led by the San Diego Supercomputer Center, and there was a corresponding alliance program led by the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, or NCSA. Those centers have continued to be involved, but the NSF program has continued to evolve. The TeraGrid program was the follow-on, if you will, to what NPACI and the Alliance offered to the research community. And the TeraGrid program is just now running into its 6th year of operation with funding from NSF.
So in comparison to others, we've just been talking about the various partnerships and a little bit of history there. With TeraGrid, what is the sum total of resources that you have? You mentioned number of organizations, but what kind of horsepower can an individual researcher submit their jobs to?
So it's an evolving landscape, and it depends, of course, on the funding from the National Science Foundation for TeraGrid. But today, there's over what we call a petaflop of computing power with the various systems that are combined, and we know there are more systems that NSF will be funding. And in fact, sometime probably in the next couple of months, we'll hear about some additional systems that NSF will be funding to provide services to the community. Collectively, TeraGrid is providing as much computing power as any other operation in the U.S. for free academic research and education. But it's not to say it's the only activity. Department of Energy also supports major computing resources, but their support is, if you will, mission-driven. They support research that's ongoing in relation to the mission of the Department of Energy. NSF is really, if you will, the most open academic research computing infrastructure that's available in the U.S. today.
So when you say the most open, what exactly do you mean by that? Is this a members-only kind of club? Do you have to provide resources to get resources? Or, how does an average Joe researcher who's got some number crunching they need to do and no machines to run it on, how do they get involved?
So again, it's open to any academic